What's up, guys? Now in this video we're going to be talking about the 3 different types of loops that are supported by Solidity. These loops include a while loop, a do while loop, as well as a for loop. Now it is very important to understand when to use these different types of loops. That is why by the end of this video you will know what each type of loop does, as well as when to implement them. Loops are essential in developing smart contracts. They make a developer's life way easier, especially when actions need to occur in a repetitive manner. Now, implementing loops also reduce the probability of you as a developer having any bugs in your code. Therefore, it is very, very important that you master the art of creating loops. But before we jump in the video, go ahead and hit that like button as well as that subscribe button and hit that push notification bell so you get all my content as soon as it comes out. Alright, so let's start off talking about the while loop. The while loop is the most basic loop supported by Solidity. Now, its purpose is to execute a statement, and in some cases, blocks of statements, repeatedly. Now, it's going to keep executing it repeatedly so far as the condition is true, and once the condition becomes false, the loop basically terminates. So this is known as an entry controlled loop. Now, this might sound a little confusing for those of you learning programming for the first time, but honestly, it's very simple. The way that I like to think about it is like making a pie. So let's say you're trying to make a pie and you have the recipe with all the ingredients in front of you. You put all the ingredients together, you follow the steps of the recipe, and you're ready to put it in the oven. Now, before you put the pie in the oven, you double check the ingredients to verify that you put all of them in. If all the ingredients are present, then you proceed with the baking process. If all the ingredients are not present, you don't proceed with the baking process and you go back and fix the recipe. All right, so let's look at step number 1 of the while loop. We are essentially executing a statement. From here, we move on to step number 2, which is evaluating the condition of our statement. Now, if our statement is true, we move over into step number 3, which executes the body of the do while loop. Now, if the test expression is false, the code outside of the while loop is then executed. So let's go ahead and demonstrate the execution of a while loop and how an array can be initialized using the while loop. All right, so let's start off by creating a contract, and we will name this contract types of loops. Now first, let's go ahead and declare a dynamic array. So I'm going to create an array of unsigned integers, and it's going to be referred to as data. Next, I'm going to declare my state variable. Now this state variable is going to be an unsigned integer 8, and I'm going to set my state variable equal to 0. Now I'm going to be defining a function to demonstrate the while loop. So let's go ahead and create a function. There are going to be no parameters of this function. It will be public, and it will return an array of unsigned integers. And we are going to save this array to memory. Now from here, I'm going to actually go ahead and make my while loop. So I'm going to type in while. And then I'm going to set the parameters of my while loop. So I want j to be less than 5. Now, j is going to start from 0 because that's what my state variable has been declared as. And j is going to go all the way up to 5 in increments of 1. So I'm going to type in j++. And then from there, I'm going to type in data.push j. Now, essentially, I'm just pushing integers into my data array. And lastly, I'm going to return my data array. So from here, we could go ahead and click deploy. And as you can see, the output of this function is an array of numbers from 1 to 5. All right, so that was fairly simple. So let's go ahead and move on to the next loop, which is a do while loop. Now this loop is very similar to the while loop, except that there is a condition check that happens at the end of the loop. That is, the loop will always execute at least one time, even if the condition is false. Basically, it's the opposite of a while loop Remember how I said a while loop was an entry controlled loop? A do while loop is an exit controlled loop. So let's go ahead and use the pie example that we brought up earlier. Now this time, instead of checking the pie for all the necessary ingredients, you just go ahead and execute the baking process without double checking. Now, if all of the ingredients were present, you have successfully baked a cake. In programming terms, the evaluation of the condition is true and the statement is then executed. But if the ingredients are not present, you have failed in baking the pie, which in programming terms is equivalent to throwing an error in your programming case. So the main difference between the first pie example and the second pie example was that in the first pie example, you noticed that there was an error before the pie was baked. Whereas in the second example, you noticed there was an error after the pie was baked. I don't know, maybe you took a slice out of the second one and then you realized that, there wasn't enough apples or whatever. So let's go ahead and look at the diagram for the do while loop. So as you can see, step one, we start off with the do while loop. Transitioning over into the second step, the body of the do while loop is then executed. Notice how the conditions have not been evaluated. Moving on to step 3, then the condition is evaluated. And then moving on to step 4, if the test expression is true, the compiler executes the body of the do while loop. Whereas in step 5, if the test expression is false, the compiler executes the statements after the loop body. And in step 6, statements that come after the loop body are then executed. So let's go ahead and demonstrate the execution of a do while loop and how an array can be initialized using the do while loop. Now I'm going to keep my same contract, except I'm going to go ahead and tweak my function. Now I'm going to change while to do, and I'm going to start off by declaring the incremental steps that I would like my do while loop to function with. So that is going to be j++. And then from there, I'm going to go ahead and push my state variable into the array data. Then I would declare a while statement where j is less than 5. And then to wrap it all up, I'm going to go ahead and return my data array. So from here, we could go ahead and click deploy. And as you can see, the output of this function is an array of numbers from 1 to 5. All right, so from there, let's go ahead and jump into the for loop. Now, this is the most compact way of looping. It takes 3 different arguments separated by a semicolon to run. Now, the first argument is a loop initialization, where the iterator is initialized with a starting value. So this statement is basically executed before the loop starts. Now, the second argument is the test statement, which basically it checks whether the condition is true or not. And if the condition is true, the loop executes or else it terminates. Now, the third argument is the iteration statement, where the iterator is increased or decreased. So let's go ahead and demonstrate the execution of a for loop and how an array can be initialized using the for loop. Now, once again, I'm going to go ahead and keep my same contract, except I will eliminate the state variable as it is not necessary in this example. And I am also going to tweak my function just like the last example. Now I have my function loop, and I'm going to go ahead and keep my parameters and my return statements the same. And I will swap out do for the for loop. And I will go ahead and implement my first argument, which is the loop initialization, which is I equals 0. Then I'm going to move on to my second argument, which is the test statement. So I'm going to put I is less than 5. And then the third argument, which is the iteration statement, I'm going to increase the increments by +1. So I'm going to go ahead and write I++. And then I'm going to go ahead and push the I integers into the data array. And then to cap it all off, I'm going to return my data array as my output. So in general, all for loops can be written as while loops and vice versa. But then you might be asking, hey, Dro, when do I use a while loop and when do I use a for loop? Well, you should always use a for loop when you know how many times the loop should run. Whereas if you want the loop to break based on a condition other than the number of times it runs, then you should probably use a while loop. The difference between the while loop and the for loop was that the output started off with 1 in the while loop, whereas in the for loop, the output started off with 0. So guys, I hope that you got a clearer understanding of the different types of loops that are supported by Solidity. Hopefully, my examples were simple enough for you to understand. Now, once again, guys, if you could go ahead and hit that like button as well as that subscribe button and hit that push notification bell so you get all my content as soon as it comes out. And be on the lookout for the next video.